video here. We're going to start back. I'm going to basically go through everything to making borscht. It's very simplified. It's almost like peasant food, but nonetheless, it is comfort food and it's amazing. It's great in the summertime when it's hot outside, and it's also amazing in the wintertime. So, with that, I've got pretty much gone today, and we pulled the dill. We're also keeping the stalks from the onions and from the garlic. Great for flavoring. We've got the potatoes done. We started pulling apart some of the dill here. Pretty straightforward to do. And we've started washing the potatoes and the carrots and the beets. So I just have a couple left in which to do here. So we're gonna finish doing that. Just pulled a couple of really nice beets from garden here. Just because I felt we were a little bit short on the supply. Like most things, beets are the main part of the recipe there, followed by potatoes. Potatoes are what gives you the flavor, but the beets is the substance, followed by the carrots. And of course, some might argue that the garlic is as well the one of the key components of that. So oddly enough, you still can always overdo garlic regardless of how much you like it. So with that said, got the beets cleaned here, got the peas done. We're going to keep the beet leaves. I'm going to cut some of those up and put those in towards the end with the peas. Just to finish it off. It gets a little bit of flavor, adds a little bit of acidity. I'm not sure if you know, but the beets themselves are fairly basic, and like most things of the yin and the yang, the beet leaves would be more acidic. So, with that said, we've got the beets all done and the carrots all done. So let's get this, and we're going to get started cutting here. But before we do, you can never have enough dill. This dill is fantastic. Now, when you're cooking the dill, you want to make sure, or when you're buying dill, I prefer not to use baby dill. It's kind of the stuff that you get in your Sobeys, your Safeways, a lot of them. I prefer either growing it yourself or going to the farmer's market, and you get the long stem dill. It's the same dill that you would use in your dill pickles. And once you've stripped all of the dill off, it's pretty straightforward to do. You don't typically want to use the stalks. I always keep the stalks, much like the onions, and I cut them, and they're amazing for flavor. So they're great for the soups. So I just usually add those and then pull those out towards the end. Usually don't eat them. All the flavor, I think, is, I use the dill itself and just not the stalk of the dill. So I'll cut all of that up, and then I've got one stock pot going. That's it. And so I'll use that. We'll start everything out of there. The garlic, the dill, the onions. So as I mentioned, you can never have enough dill. And I use a ton of it. I have yet to experience a soup where I felt like I've gone overboard, but I mean, I guess it's all within reason. And it's so fragrant. I always laugh when I think that dill is classified as a weed. Similar to the raspberries, they grow really fast, and but in dill pickles, garlic and dill, it's such a main component. I'm also using a head of garlic. I will also use the peel from the garlic. That's another good flavor component. And again, I'll pull that out at the end when we're done with the soup there. So, and I like to go fine on the garlic, so I'm going to crush it. Just your standard garlic crusher here. So we'll take that, and then we'll blend in olive oil, butter. I can never get enough of butter and olive oil, and I'll cook that at a super low heat so that you don't ruin the nutritional value of the olive oil. And as you can tell here, I keep stuffing in a bunch of garlic. So we'll utilize a ton of garlic. And I know that there's some philosophy out there that you shouldn't use garlic unless you've got a bacteria. But I absolutely love garlic in a couple of key dishes, and borscht being one of them. I just feel like you can never get enough. And when it's cooked, you actually don't get the halitosis effect from garlic. So one thing to keep in mind that I've learned, and I don't know what is, there's some type of enzymes in the garlic, but in order to take full advantage of those, you should actually crush your garlic, which will activate the enzymes. And I think in the garlic, there's something that if you leave it out, it's evading me right now, but there's a term it can actually get that is can be very serious to you if you're eating garlic that's been left out where the enzymes have been activated. Not as such is the case here, but they say for about minimum 5 minutes to get the maximum effect or benefit of garlic. So you can see I have a ton of garlic here, and we've also been cutting up I've already put some onions in here. That's pretty straightforward. Salt and pepper, and I'm just stirring that around. So you can see there I've got some stalks of the garlic. I'm just actually gonna turn that right down until we finish cutting up the other parts of the onion there. But I did want to talk to you a little bit about the dill and my love for it. So that'll just go in, and we'll probably put more dill in as we continue on with the making of the borscht here. So yeah, so that's all cut up. So if you've noticed, I'm not really reading from anything. It's just kind of going by feel, like what I think would be good for the borscht. I think that's one of the things that makes those recipes of your parents so good is they sort of have a bit of a formula. I use a head of garlic, and it's a good bulb size, right? These are the ones that are coming from, that's a Russian garlic. If you're in the store, you might want to use 2 heads of garlic, or maybe you don't even like garlic. It's up to you. That's the beauty about the borscht. And again, the onions, this is all just kind of that garden vegetable late fall harvest that you're just mixing everything together. And it's just, I think it stems from, out of necessity, what people had and what they used and, what they ate. And for me, it's just, it's such a staple, going over to my grandma's house when I was young, the pierogies that she made, and the Easter bread and the borscht. It was just always a summer staple. It was on her stove all the time when I would come over, and she had she always changed things up. And I should talk to you about the broth that I'm using. I had picked up some bison broth that I'm going to be using today. Sorry, the onions are hitting me here. So yeah, the bison broth I find has a really good taste to it. Feel free to use beef broth, vegetable broth, whatever's to your liking there. Again, all of these things, change the consistency or the taste of the dish, and whatever you're prone to or whatever you like, just use that. I don't think that there's any wrong or right. When I was in Russia about 15 years ago, I had some clients make me a blonde borscht. I can't even tell you what was in it. But that's kind of what we've got there. We've got a bunch of dill. We've got garlic in there, a couple of onions, a head of garlic. So I'm just going to put that on, and we will start sauteing that. Just as I mentioned, good old olive oil, and just throw a douse in there. I can never get discouraged from using olive oil. Again, we were talking about, salt and pepper, so I'm just gonna put some pepper in there. Everything's to taste as you're making your dish or your soup. I just put some in there. Always make sure to taste your broth and make sure that it's not too salty. The reason being, just don't want to oversalt your dish there. You want to have the enhancement of the flavor there. So, that onion really threw me for a bit of a loop. So I'm going to turn that up, and we're going to get, that's a couple onions in there right now. And now I'm just going to start going into making the cutting up of the vegetables. And I'm just going to discard the remnants here. But, as you're going through the whole process, the eating of the carrots and just everything's so good. And the flavor that gets throughout the house is also one of my favorite things. I can't tell you enough about the flavor and the smell and the scent of the borscht when you walk in. It just, I don't know, it's home cooking, right? So when I'm cutting up my my beets, I just usually put them into cubes, like so. So nothing really out of the ordinary. So those are blonde beets. So I'll be using a combination of blonde beets and as well as your typical red beets here. So you can see the difference between the two. I don't honestly know if there's a difference in flavor, but it's great for color, especially if you're just roasting the beets. I like using that. Just the color and the vibrancy, and I think that's why fall is one of my favorite seasons. It just shows all the colors and the harvest of the meals there. So as I mentioned, there's your blonde and there's your red beets there. So what I'll typically do is, as I'm cutting up the beets, I'll typically put those into probably, I don't know, 1/2-inch cubes, like so. Oops. There's a 1/2-inch cube, and then as I go into cutting up the carrots, fairly similar. We'll cut those up, and we'll put those into a 1/2-inch cube, like so. Now for the potatoes, so here's where the secret for the borscht is. Potatoes are extremely starchy, right? So it doesn't matter if you're using red potatoes. Just don't use russets. They're way too starchy. But all I'm typically going to do with your potatoes is I'm just going to cut them in half. That's it. The secret to fantastic borscht is taking the potatoes after they've released their starches, and then I'll mash them, and then that will create the consistency and the thickness of your borscht there. So again, that's all I'm doing. I'm just cutting those up in half, but for the beets and for the carrots, I will do those into cubes. So once my borscht or my onions and garlic has sauteed, I've got butter there. I wish you could smell this because it's just amazing. I'll then cut up the beets, the carrots, and the potatoes. Put the bone broth in, and then probably let that sit for a couple of hours. Ideally, what you want to do is start your borscht typically around noon, and or even 1 or 2 o'clock, and 4 hours, and all those flavors just come out. Even better, obviously, on the second day. And then the last thing that I just wanted to share, as I mentioned, I usually will take peas, half a cup, what have you. So again, these came out of the garden. If you're watching the earlier video there, there's just nothing better. I'm going to steal those ones. Those ones aren't making it into the soup. And those will go in because they don't take a long time to cook. Just the heat from the soup itself. And then I'll throw in some beet leaves. I'll dice those up. So if you've got any questions, that's kind of the making of borscht. The prep time is probably your biggest thing to do. Everything else is just on a simmer mode. So enjoy the rest of your summer, and we'll talk soon.